hope to offer you some insights as to why it's common to feel relief when the narcissist dies. This also happened to me. My father died recently, and when I heard, I felt an instant sense of relief. First, for him, because I've come to understand and feel compassion towards someone who's been afflicted with this psychopathology. I imagine it must be torturous to continuously have to defend your superiority, hide your shame, feel like the whole world is against you, and fill the void of an excruciating emptiness. So I first felt relief for him, that he's finally free, at peace. It's over for him to be playing this role in this body, in that mind. Then I felt relief for myself. It was overwhelming and like a weight had been lifted. I realized I was finally free. The abuser's physical presence in our life is menacing. We may notice ourselves shrinking back, not just energetically and emotionally, but also physically from their presence. You may notice yourself avoiding going to family get-togethers or places where you might bump into them and possibly get abused by their reckless, inconsiderate, or deliberate offensive behavior or words. So the narcissist's physical presence can be a trigger for anxiety and panic. We often have a physical reaction to their physical presence. We may get triggered by people who look like them. I used to be surprised how fast I felt nausea as soon as I saw a similarity of how he looked, how his voice sounded, that domineering, overbearing body language, the smug facial expression. If I saw that in someone else, who probably wasn't even a narcissist, I would literally feel nauseous. So it's no wonder we feel relief that we will never have to see them again physically. And I'm advocating for the voiceless. I'm expressing what it's like for us, the unseen, the unheard, the ones narcissists paint as the crazy ones. I'm sharing the things that most people don't want to hear because we're all too busy trying to preserve the narcissist's reputation. And surprisingly, the reason why we don't feel grief or sadness like we would for someone whom we truly loved or who really loved us is exactly that. There was no love between us and our abuser. It was control. It was a transaction. We were often guilt-tripped and felt obligated to feel some sort of forced connection they called love. It wasn't genuine. We were shamed and it was demanded that we love them. After all, they'll declare all the things they did for us, so they're entitled to our love and respect. That has got nothing to do with love, but mostly just about maintaining their persona. And believe me, I wish I had a nicer story to tell. Please note that with healing and maturity, you'll reach a certain level of acceptance about the way things were. You'll get to a place of a dispassionate observation about the way your relationship was. It's often our resistance to accepting the way things were that causes us prolonged suffering. And we may often feel grief for a fantasy, for a role that we imagined or hoped for. So please be mindful if you're romanticizing the relationship you had with the narcissist, because it's a common trap in these abusive relationships, and especially after the perceived finality of death. So we can feel a type of insincere grief based on a fantasy that we had about them. So we can experience an awkward, icky, confusing type of sadness tinged with nostalgia, because perhaps you do recall times where you did feel that they genuinely cared for you. I honestly do have some lovely memories of my dad when I was much younger. However, you too may have noticed in your experience that narcissists get worse with age. The abuse, the control, the addictions, and everything that goes along with this psychopathology. So it can be really confusing to discern reality from fantasy when you're in a relationship with a skilled emotional manipulator. At this delicate time, perhaps well-meaning people who were deluded by the narcissist's performance, or even therapists who presume that death of a significant person in your life is usually marked by genuine outbursts of heartfelt emotion and crying. When we don't display that because we feel relief or nothing, they may knowingly or unknowingly make comparative remarks that could trigger guilt in us because of our lack of response. So please just observe that. And if this has happened to you, it's just an indicator that they don't know the whole picture. And you need to honour whatever comes up for you and stand firm in that. And save your energy by not lashing out at them. And even though those remarks do feel excruciatingly personal, please don't take them personally. Stay true to your heart and let it go, because they don't know what they're doing. They've either been conditioned to perpetuate the abuse, or they are completely ignorant about the covert nature of narcissistic abuse. And another thing I need to touch on is that even though they physically have departed, and we may feel like the final chapter on this book has closed, there could also be grief for the lack of closure, for the answers that you will never get, and the opportunities that you will never have of having one more conversation with them that gives you some sort of acknowledgement. This might sound blunt to people who don't understand narcissistic relationships, but the truth of the matter of these torturous engagements is that it was a fake relationship, so we feel a sense of relief that now we can finally stop faking, pretending, and the pressure of maintaining that inauthenticity starts to subside. It may be instant or it might be subtle, but it's like the pressure has been taken off. The relief is often associated with no longer having to maintain a lie. It takes a lot of energy to keep up illusions, deceptions. Not being truthful is very costly energetically. And the most costly lies are the ones that we tell ourselves. The most common lies we tell ourselves include, "It's not so bad. They didn't mean it that way. Yeah, sure, I feel hurt. Tomorrow or next week will be better." And we have to repeatedly tell ourselves certain things that are not true to maintain that false relationship. So being in delusion is a type of lying. And the longer that we lie to ourselves about how we feel, about what we want, about how things are, the more we lose ourselves. And this results in a chronic and perpetual state of grief that we may become numb to. And it often scares us to notice this lack of a normal response to losing someone significant in our life. Shouldn't we be crying, mourning, or at least feel sad? Could we be psychopathic? So that absence of what people consider a healthy reaction to loss often triggers feelings of shame, guilt, or confusion. We feel ashamed to admit that we feel so little, but yet we feel guilty to admit we feel no guilt, or we feel guilty that we feel relieved. So we judge and punish ourselves for it, and so the inner abuse continues. Because the pattern is that what we honestly feel is always wrong. Our emotions were never validated, but just got used as an opportunity to be made wrong. So we continue to do that to ourselves. So please stop and accept how you feel. Yes, even if you feel relief or nothing at all. I hope you find these insights helpful and that you absolve yourself from perpetuating any more mental torture. After all, that's exactly what they'd want, right? I realized even after the death of my mother, who wasn't a narcissist, who I loved, the reason why I felt relief is because I'd already spent my entire life grieving. Ever since I was a little girl, my greatest fear was that my mother was going to die. I was always scared something bad was going to happen to her. And I became hypervigilant throughout my whole childhood. It took over my whole life to the point where I couldn't make decisions for myself. It was all about ensuring her safety first. I grieved and I was sad about her always putting the toxic relationship before me. It took me years to realize I was in a toxic relationship with my parents. So the loss and grief was always there. The lack of intimacy, the inability to be myself, the loss of time and opportunities, money, the loss of my voice. So much loss when your life orbits around a narcissist, or when you're trying to save someone that you care about from a toxic relationship. Maybe for you, you're trying to save your brother or your sister, or maybe it's one of your children. When you see someone that you love suffering and being abused, it's exasperating to watch them and not see what you see. And you probably don't realize at the time that you yourself are absorbing and processing a lot of their grief and other repressed emotions like anger. We don't realize, and especially if we are children, that we've stepped into the role of savior But unfortunately, in dysfunctional families, you cannot be yourself. You must play a role. So whether you're aware of it or not, it's how we survive and try and make sense of things when everything is nonsensical and inverted. We're so enmeshed that we think that feeling sad every day, feeling empty, disconnected to our parent, spouse, or family, we think it's normal. No, these are aspects of grief, a prolonged and ongoing grief, which is the nature of toxic relationships. So when the narcissist dies, it's like the grief ends. We have a liberating moment of freedom. I literally felt like I could breathe for the first time in my life, because with a narcissist still in your life, you feel like you can't breathe. You can't be yourself. You can't make your own choices, even if you've set a physical boundary. These relationships are parasitic. So if you've been a good source of supply, the narcissist will refuse to let you go. They'll disregard you blocking your phone and try other clever ways to reach you. They'll even disregard court orders and restraining orders. Narcissists have no respect for your boundaries, physical or otherwise. It's exhausting to continuously have to fight just to be able to break free from their grip of control over your life. They simply don't want to let you go. And they've manipulated everyone around you, your family, your friends. They've trained their flying monkeys. So when the puppet master dies, the puppets will eventually start running out of ammunition, and all the scripts they were indoctrinated to repeat the abuse and the trauma. It might sound strange to people who don't understand complex trauma, but our grief often ends, not begins, when they die. And I have no guilt or shame even saying that. It is what it is. The truth shall set you free. And we've never had the opportunity to feel how liberating it is to tell the honest truth about how we feel. There's nothing wrong with you feeling relieved when your abuser dies. The grief I was finally free to feel was for myself. Everything I'd lost that was taken from me. I felt sadness for all the ways I was taken advantage of, manipulated, gaslit. And then I was free to feel anger when I imagined a little innocent girl being deceived for so many decades in so many ways. So I was free to mourn the loss of my innocence. And I felt the overwhelming love for my inner child, who only ever wanted her father's attention, affection, and genuine love. So the narcissist's death often becomes a gateway to profound healing of our heart. We can finally get some clarity, maybe have a better chance of finding ourselves and who we are. And it also eventually offers you the opportunity to see the narcissist in perhaps a more compassionate light that perhaps we couldn't see when they were still alive. I'm no longer angry or sad. I'm mostly accepting of his role. I'm compassionate towards the role he had to play in order for me to become who I am today. Yeah, sure, I wished things were different, but the truth is they were what they were. Please remember that what some perceive as a loss is actually a gain. It all depends on context, but you can trust that your perspective will change with time. How you feel now, whatever that is, maybe you do genuinely feel grief. Grief ebbs and flows like waves of an ocean, but often the physical death of the narcissist in our life feels like a liberating new beginning for us. The death of your narcissist is an opportunity to disidentify from the role and eventually surrender that role of daughter, savior, scapegoat, black sheep. It's an opportunity to liberate yourself from yet another limiting label, an egoic fiction, which is not you. With distance and detachment, I'm now able to see my father from my ego's perspective and also from my soul's perspective. And I'm at peace when I choose to change the filter of my perception. I've come to appreciate the lessons and the wisdom I've gained from having a father who was a covert narcissist. He demonstrated the type of man I should never be in a relationship with. And my mother's choice showed me who not to get involved with. So the value of having those painful experiences prevented me from repeating that pattern. So focus on what you've gained and not what you've lost. I hope to encourage you to develop a higher perspective of what the death of the narcissist in your life represents. You can see it from your ego's perspective, and the pain will continue, and you'll be trapped in the story, or you can begin to see it from your soul's perspective. By integrating and surrendering the pain, the anger, the grief, the blame, we can lovingly set ourselves and them free. We get to choose to no longer participate, because who would want to repeat this? Not me. I'm done with any invitations to further insanity. And I hope you are too. And this is exactly the perspective that I intend to teach from. A higher vantage point where you can finally overcome and transcend this transgenerational trauma.